Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. Happy to be with you once again. It's Tyler Donohue, and January, always an action-packed month across the college football landscape. Happy Valley right now is no exception. In just a moment, you'll hear from my colleagues, Daniel Gallen and Tyler Calvaruso. A lot of roster news to work our way through here. We're less than 10 days removed from the Rose Bowl. The last time we saw this team in action, we already have a lot to look at in terms of roster shifts. We have a roster retirement, a couple confirmed returners that had been weighing their NFL draft options, and a bunch of new enrollees ranging from freshmen to transfer players. So a lot to get to. A little bit later, after we go through all of that stuff, you'll hear from one of the newest members of this Penn State roster, defensive back Lamont Payne, who signed with the Nittany Lions in December, enrolled just this week. He's underway with classes as of Monday. We caught up with him just before he got to campus. In fact, right before he was loading up the car on Friday. So stay tuned for that conversation in just a moment. But first, let's bring in Tyler Calvaruso and Daniel Gallen, who, Daniel, I hope you've had a little bit of chance to recover. You've been out to LA for the Rose Bowl. You've been to the Palestra for Penn State basketball. So we're getting you back in the mix. And Tyler Calvaruso, you have no time to breathe right now because the transfer portal continues to turn. So both of you, always appreciate it, hopping on with me and getting a chance to break down the latest.
For sure. I mean, today's the first day back in State College after a little bit of an odyssey with LA, Maryland, Philly. So I'm ready to get back after it.
Yeah, the only odyssey I take is from like my desk to my kitchen. So yeah.
Your odyssey is what you're hearing on the phones
exactly.
and what you're messaging, and that's your odyssey because things are changing. We'll get into that a little bit. There's a little bit of drama kind of swirling around the transfer class that we thought as we knew it. But let's begin with the fact that Penn State finished off this latest season at number 7 in the final Associated Press Top 25 poll, also number 7 in the coaches poll. And Daniel, as you wrote on Tuesday morning, this was a Nittany Lions program coming off an 11-11 two-year stretch that was unranked when things opened up at Purdue on September 1st.
Definitely. Penn State finishes at number 7 in the final AP poll. They got into the top 15 around mid-September after that Auburn win, after that Central Michigan win. And they were really in the top 15 for the rest of the season. There were, after the losses to Michigan and Ohio State, they dipped down to number 16, but quickly worked their way up, hovered around the top 10. And with that win over Utah, with some of the other things that happened around them, they finished the year firmly within the AP poll top 10. So I think as you kind of look forward, you look at the teams that are around them, what they're losing, what Penn State has coming back. Things are setting up very nicely for this to be a very talked about team this offseason. We've even seen it from within our own network, the 24/7 Sports Way Too Early Top 25 has Penn State in there at number 5. There's a lot of excitement. But I think when you look back at kind of the progression of the team, it was a pretty impressive year from where they started. We had lots of questions. Being unranked seemed pretty normal, pretty rational, a good spot for where this team was coming off of 2021. But they firmly, and pretty quickly asserted themselves. And even though they had those 2 losses to Michigan and Ohio State, when you look back at the season, those are 2 pretty good losses to have. So I think Penn State has set itself up pretty well for a good future and a lot to talk about this offseason as we're getting started to do right now.
And this team was 6-2 with 2 losses in 3 weeks against Michigan, against Ohio State. We wondered aloud on this podcast for a couple weeks, really, where would it take a turn in November? Would this team, finish strong? Would it be a repeat performance of 2021 where the things kind of unravel? Maybe guys get disinterested, guys start to opt out mentally, guys start to opt out legitimately in the postseason. Instead, we saw this team rally around each other, deliver 4 emphatic blowouts of inferior conference opponents along the course of November. Then they encounter number 8 Utah, who just walloped USC, a team that everyone already had pegged as going to the college football playoff, had a Heisman Trophy winner as their starting quarterback, and Penn State built a 21-point fourth quarter lead over that Utah team to finish things out. So interestingly enough, outside of that Ohio State game, the Michigan game, and then go back to week 1 when it was a down to the wire finish against Purdue, these were 5 straight cakewalk kind of performances. I don't want to say that about Utah because they lost their quarterback, but Daniel, you and I were both underway with our post-game stories when that third quarter was transitioning to the fourth quarter, and I don't think any of us expected that out in Pasadena. And looking around, aside from the way that they handled business with the big big margins of victory. I think the other thing to remember here is James Franklin has been pointing time and time again as the last couple of years being outliers for his program, specifically last year. 2020 was COVID. I know Franklin puts that in its own kind of box, and a lot of people do. And I think as we get further away, it's going to be more obvious that that's the case. But now 4 out of 7 years, fellas, where Penn State finishes inside the top 10 in Associated Press top 25 poll. It's only the first time that's been done since 1990 through 1996. So people are searching for how this thing is training under James Franklin. The latest season certainly a sign of success, but I think overall, you look at a guy that you're committed to long-term as a university right now, that's quite the span they've been able to put together. And coming out of this, Tyler Calvaruso, Daniel just touched on it. I just talked about it. There's a ton of buzz around this team right now. It's very much different than what we heard in January 2022, January 2021. How do we see that maybe translating onto the recruiting trail as Penn State tries to get recruits on campus, tries to build that 2024 class, and tries to ensure that they are a national name that belongs with the seat of the table across the country?
Well, I could tell you right now, headed into this weekend, we got the big junior day coming up that I'm sure we're going to get into later. There's a lot of buzz surrounding that, and I think the season that Penn State just put together definitely plays a major role in that. You don't want to say like winning the Rose Bowl is bells and whistles, but when you have such a good season, then you cap it by winning such a prestigious bowl game like the Rose Bowl, and recruits come to campus, they see the trophy, they see all of the excitement just surrounding the program after such a big win on a national stage. A lot of guys are intrigued because they want to be part of something like that. A lot of these guys, they want to play in the playoff, but they want to be playing big-time college football, and that's what Penn State has to offer right now. And it's pretty apparent to a lot of the names that are coming to campus. So I don't want to say the buzz is at an all-time high because I just feel like that's such a reach in any situation, but a lot of buzz surrounding the Nittany Lions in a positive manner right now. And we're going to see that come to fruition this weekend with a pretty impressive list already coming to campus. Only Tuesday, already a lot of intriguing names.
Yeah, that list is up at Lions247.com. It is a conversation we're going to get into a little bit later here on the podcast. Maybe an all-time high for you as someone who's covered the program since June in terms of what you've experienced and what you're hearing. And let's get back to the cause of some of that buzz. We've heard players on this Penn State roster who are going to be back tell us that the expectations are to compete for a national championship in 2023. One of the guys who said that to us most directly in post-game conversations out in Pasadena was Curtis Jacobs. And Daniel Gallen, he's sticking around for 2023. A huge win for Penn State. We'll get to another in a moment, but this is going to be a third-year starter at linebacker who I think we both feel has a lot to gain, a lot to develop from coming back for year 4.
Curtis Jacobs made it pretty short and sweet today. We had to wait a little bit, but his graphic came out and it just said, "I'm back. I'm going to play for Penn State next year," which, I think, straight to the point. Curtis Jacobs can be someone of a lot of words sometimes, but I appreciate the brevity there. When you look at what his return does for this roster, I think from a pure talent perspective, he is one of the most athletic defenders that they have. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of McDonough in Maryland in the class of 2020. We've seen those skills, especially at that Sam linebacker spot out in space. He's really been able to, use his athleticism out there to make some plays. And at the same time, he isn't really, he's not afraid to mix it up inside. He likes to dish out some punishment. And he had that big game against Minnesota, a really run heavy attack. I think 14 tackles. He's someone who can be a playmaker. I think there is a question of consistently doing it week in and week out for him. But I do like what he brings back. And then from the team perspective, Penn State slated to return its 3 starting linebackers right now. Abdul Carter, Tyler Elsdon / Kobe King, and then Curtis Jacobs. Jonathan Sutherland is the only guy from that group who's projected to leave right now. You're bringing in those 3 freshmen. Dom DeLuca is on scholarship now. He fits in nicely at that Sam spot. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Keon Wiley and Tyrese Mills, 2 freshmen that we didn't see at all or much of for different reasons this year. And then Jamari Budden is still on the roster too. So, there are a lot of pieces there. Depth was kind of a concern these past 2 seasons, but I think the emergence of someone like DeLuca, seeing the strides that Kobe King made, getting Jacobs back, having Abdul Carter be this just headline player, and then with the freshmen coming in, I think you have to feel really good about that linebacker spot right now, which wasn't necessarily the case at times these past 2 seasons. So I think Curtis Jacobs coming back, I think it's one of those situations where it'll be mutually beneficial for both sides. Jacobs comes back, he gets the chance to show what he can do again, boost that draft stock, maybe kind of define a little bit more what he might be at the next level. He does feel like kind of a tweener right now, even though I do think he has the skill set to play in the modern NFL, given the way that things are trending there. And then for Penn State, anytime you can return an athlete like that, someone who plays an important position, someone who I thought was utilized pretty well by Manny Diaz. I mean, I just keep going back to the strip sack he had at Rutgers, where it seemed like he was in the backfield immediately. I don't think I've seen someone get to the quarterback that quickly. So you're bringing that type of player back, someone who can really make plays, someone who can be utilized in different ways. I think that bodes really well for this defense. And I think both sides can get a big boost from Curtis Jacobs coming back in 2023.
Jacobs finished third on the team with 52 total tackles. He had 7.5 of those for loss, 4 sacks on the season, along with an interception. And with Jacobs returning, we'll talk about those 2 early enrollees in just a bit. They got 2 guys on campus here at linebacker who just showed up, underway the classes this week. But defensive end is a spot that we have been trying to forecast. What's it going to look like? We knew Nick Tarburton heading into the Rose Bowl. That was going to be his farewell moment. He's moving on, trying to take his shot at the NFL instead of using that COVID year. But beyond that, right now, it's looking like a very strong group of experienced veterans, getting a huge boost on Sunday when Adisa Isaac announced that he'll be returning for his 5th year with the Penn State football program. And Isaac's a guy that, you and I both spoke with out in Los Angeles, Daniel, and very hard at that time to gauge where his mind was at. I think he's one guy that hadn't had his mind made up going into kickoff and the Rose Bowl. And perhaps even when the game was finished in a few days, the dust settled, perhaps he didn't have his mind up. Maybe that's why we saw it take almost a week for him to announce. At the end of the day, though, they're getting back a player who was certainly on the rise as this season progressed. Let's remember he missed the 2021 season with a torn Achilles, suffered that offseason. That dashed a lot of what he was hoping to accomplish in 2022 because he was limited in spring ball. Felt like he was still working his way back mentally and physically as this season went on. I think he went so far as to say before the Rose Bowl, he still didn't feel like he was at 100%. And a big thing for him in making this return, aside from being able to add a huge component to what looks like a potentially stellar Penn State defensive unit, is that he can really build that draft stock. And in my opinion, Daniel, anybody on this roster that we can go through and kind of sort through, and I think Olu Fashanu has already established himself up there, but he is the guy that I think has a launch pad underneath his feet in 2023, because Adisa Isaac is going to get his first full offseason with Penn State since his freshman year when he enrolled in January of 2019. Of 2020. And so we're trying to figure out where exactly Adisa Isaac is in his progression. It's hard to figure out because he just hasn't had a chance to be with this program and be healthy. And it's going to happen this year, hopefully. And I think it's just great news for this group that brings back Denai Dennis Sutton, Chop Robinson, Amin Vanover. The list goes on. There's other guys, Uriah Fisher, Smith Vilbert. What do you get from them? You've got some freshmen coming in. And so that's a lot of names to work your way through. If you're Manny Diaz and John Scott, that you say, he's played a lot of Big Ten football, and he's going to be ready for us when it's time to snap again.
I think there's a good chance that going into next year, Adisa Isaac is Penn State's top draft eligible prospect on the defensive side of the ball. I think that you look at the position that he plays, the skill set that he has, and some of the production that he had this year. He led the team with 8 quarterback hurries. It seemed like as the season went on, he was in the backfield a lot more, always around the quarterback, really being able to affect plays. We also saw him make some plays in space. The way that Manny Diaz utilized him a little bit with some of those zone blitz looks where he would drop off the line of scrimmage into the flat and play a little bit of zone. So he's someone that I think that Manny Diaz has shown that he can do a lot with, and Adisa Isaac is someone who can do a lot. We've talked about it before where at the edge rusher spot, you can never really have too many guys there. And to have someone like Adisa Isaac who's coming back, I think that bodes really well, especially when we saw what Chop Robinson was able to do. You know, you're going to want Denai Dennis Sutton to really make that next step and to really be able to make plays, before the fourth quarter with a lot of his sacks. But I think that getting Adisa Isaac back, it kind of gives you that sort of headliner of a pass rusher, which I think that when you look at defenses around college football, a lot of the best ones have guys off the edge that can really be disruptive and make things happen. So I'm really curious to see what Adisa Isaac looks like physically after getting this full off season, after being healthy, being able to go through things. He weighed in the 240s this year. And I think James Franklin kind of said that that weight was good for where he was right now, but they might want him to be a little bit heavier down the road. So I'm curious to see if that's something that, given his health status now, that they're able to accomplish and what that translates to. But I think that when you look at this defense, the starting 11 next year of guys who are eligible for the draft, I think that he is the one who could hear his name called first out of that group. And I think that he's someone who can have a really big year and really set the tone for this defense.
He's a former top 100 prospect. As I said, first time in a few years he's going to have that full offseason. But Daniel, your boy, your guy, Kalen King, I just can't believe you'd shift away from him like that. I think he's got a chance to go really high in that draft, and I know you're high on him too. But that was one thing that kept coming to my mind when you were going through that conversation was Kalen King might have something to say about that when it's all said.
It was either Adisa or Kalen, but I'll go Adisa right now, but in a couple weeks I might flip.
Okay. We had one roster departure to get to as well because Bryce Effner announced that he is stepping away from football. He's a guy that, like a Juice Scruggs, like a Nick Tarburton, declined the opportunity to use COVID eligibility with Penn State. But he's not going to the NFL draft. He says he's hanging up the cleats based on an announcement he put out on Sunday. And this is a guy that really an unsung – I don't want to know if you want to go all the way to hero, but certainly an unsung storyline of this whole season was his ability to step up and play a few different positions. Early on in the season with Theo Johnson off the field, he was playing a jumbo tight end and some run blocking situations. As the season wore on, he was playing some guard roles. And, of course, we saw him at right tackle for the final half of the season and then into the Rose Bowl in that starting role. And ultimately what you saw from Bryce Effner was a breakout year in terms of his value to this program. And it came after a spring that was lost to him. He was sidelined by some undisclosed injuries. He's had some medical hardships along the way, getting himself right. 36 games played with Penn State, and ultimately a guy who went out on top, starting in the Rose Bowl. His first 4 years on campus, Daniel, he was a factor last year a little bit. He started 2 games at left tackle, but this year took another level. You got to give certainly a salute to Bryce Effner for his work this year, a guy that we didn't expect to see this much of, and he played a ton of football and now stepping aside from the game.
He was someone who had a really defined role this year, where last year he was kind of the jack of all trades. He had to do everything on the offensive line because they were pretty shorthanded. So he had to play guard, he had to play tackle. He probably could have played center if they needed him to, but with the addition of Hunter Norzad and with kind of the emergence of some other players on that line, Effner really got to focus in on being that swing tackle this year. And we saw how much that paid off. He played his way into a rotation with Caden Wallace. James Franklin said that Bryce Effner earned his way there. And then when Caden Wallace went down in the Minnesota game, Effner was really able to step in and finish out the year. Obviously, he wasn't the most physically talented or the most physically imposing player out there. I think he was listed at 287 at one point this year or last year, which is a little bit small for a Big Ten right tackle. I think one of my colleagues remarked at the Rose Bowl that he looked like someone who was already had the body type that looked ready for after football. With kind of the composition, but you need those types of guys.
I may have been that colleague, Daniel, because I mean he looks like a guy who's already had a little time with football, has lost some of the bad, quote unquote bad weight that you don't necessarily need if you're not trying to push 300-pound defensive linemen on a weekly basis. So he's a guy that I think next time we see him, he may look thin. He might go the Phil Troutwine route.
Exactly, but I think that when you're building a program, those are the types of players that you need. Guys who are around for 5 years. Guys that are able to grow into these types of roles and develop where, you might not get much out of them in their first 3 years, but you look at their 4th and 5th years that they have the experience and, they have enough talent that they can come in and contribute when they're called upon. So I thought it was a pretty cool year for Bryce Effner, AKA Big Slab, one of my favorite nicknames on the team. I remember talking to Juice Scruggs before the season, and Juice was kind of talking about what Bryce Effner had been through from an injury standpoint and what it took for him to get back to this point. And I think that it's pretty impressive that Effner stuck with it. And, I think it's, pretty cool that he gets to go out, winning a Rose Bowl, starting, playing most of the game. And, he gets to hang it up now. He gets to move on. And the last time he was on the football field, he was in Pasadena on that podium, celebrating with his teammates.
He played more than 600 snaps this season. His first 4 years on campus, fewer than 350 total snaps. Great way to finish it, and an example of a guy sticking with it in an era where maybe that's not always the case anymore in college football. When you get past year 3, you start to look around at your transfer options. That closes the book, by the way, on the 2018 offensive line recruiting class, which also featured Rasheed Walker, who just spent his rookie season with the Green Bay Packers, and then Nana Asadu, who, if you recall, had a heart condition detected when he got to campus. At enrollment, ultimately was not able to play college football. Fellas, there's a lot to look at in terms of additions to this roster. We just talked about a couple guys who are being retained, one leaving. Let's get into the transfer conversation. Then we'll talk about the freshmen. Storm Duck, we heard from you on this, Tyler Calvaruso. I think it was last week when we started to review some of these guys more in depth, but officially in the fold, along with a couple specialists that we're going to let Daniel do the heavy lifting on. But Storm Duck, immediately you have to imagine the impact, because unlike the freshman, this is a one-and-done situation, and he's looking to maximize it. So is Penn State.
Yeah, and it's like I said in the last time that we discussed, Duck, whether he starts every single game for Penn State this upcoming season, whether he's a rotational piece, it doesn't really matter, because the fact of the matter is this is a high-quality depth addition for the Nittany Lions. He fits Manny Diaz's defense with his length on the outside. We're talking about a guy who's 6'2", 200 pounds, uses his length to his advantage in coverage, really strong in run support, hits like a safety, has the toughness of a safety. So Penn State's not going to have any issues in that regard. And just an overall quality addition. And this was something that Penn State really set out to accomplish this offseason on the defensive end. You know, because when you lose a guy like Joey Porter Jr., it goes without saying, it takes a lot to replace him. And while Storm Duck, you know, it's pretty much impossible to replace exactly what Joey Porter Jr. was able to accomplish this past season. This is a pretty good job of the staff by bringing in a guy who has that skill set. Because, and we touched on this a little bit as well, if Duck hadn't dealt with the amount of injuries that he did at North Carolina, there's a good chance he's getting ready to be a pro right now. That's just the fact of it. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was an all ACC selection this past season, coming off 2 injury-riddled seasons. I think that speaks to what he can do when he's healthy and when he's on the field and not really dealing with the nagging stuff that kind of hindered his career with the Tar Heels. So Penn State's excited about this addition. I'm excited to see where he fits in the secondary. A lot of ways Manny Diaz can put him to use, and I think you're going to see him lined up all over the place.
A bit more under the radar in terms of what Penn State's bringing to town here in January, but potentially quite pivotal when we look at the special teams and what it's going to involve in 2023. There's still some unanswered questions there. But Daniel, a couple additions, a punter, a kicker.
Yeah, we know that James Franklin likes to invest bodies at special teams, and I think that you're seeing that with Alex Falcons coming in from Columbia. He's the kicker. And then you have punter Riley Thompson coming in from Florida Atlantic. Falcons has 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. Thompson will have 1. So it's some short-term bodies to have back there, guys that can, maybe push the scholarship players, guys that can maybe find a role one way or the other, because we also know that James Franklin and Stacey Collins, they like to really specialize when it comes to special teams, whether that's long field goals, short field goals, kickoffs, probably punting situations. If these guys have what Penn State is looking for, there's a good chance that they could find a role. Falcons made 67% of his field goal attempts at Columbia, 4-6 from 40-plus yards this past fall, high of 53 yards. Thompson was someone who really impressed in his first year on the scene. He's an Australian. He turned 23 on Monday. He got the happy birthday shout out from James Franklin right after they announced that he had enrolled. So that's a little bit different. Penn State hasn't had an Australian style kicker in a while. So that could make the punting unit look a little bit different next year. But he's joining a room that has Alex Paqueta in it, that has Gabe Wosu in it. So we'll see exactly how that sorts out. Let me see. Yeah, Thompson ranked 15th nationally in punting average. 14 of his punts were fair caught, 26 inside the opponent's 20-yard line, 15 of 50-plus yards, long of 71. So there is a leg there. He's a bigger guy, 6'2", 215. And that seems like something a little bit different for the special teams unit. But, Penn State does return some scholarship players at both spots. Alex Paqueta is back at punter. Sanders Sahadak will be back at kicker. We haven't gotten a definite answer on what Jake Pinniger is going to do. He can return for a 60-year if he wants to. So that'll be something else to monitor as we get a little bit deeper into January and towards spring football.
Yeah, Pinniger, the full-time place kicker here for Penn State, 4 of 5 years. Along the way, ceding some long-distance reps to Jordan Stout, who took over the job entirely for most of the 2021 season. But yeah, we're still waiting on that one. Paqueta got involved in 2 games over the course of his freshman season and maintained redshirt as a punter. But people don't want to hear any more about specialists. They want to hear about receivers, because that is what Penn State needs right now out of the transfer portal, losing approximately 60% of their production from that position in the form of Parker Washington and also Mitchell Tinsley leaving the program. So let's get into it. One name that we thought we might speak with a little more finality today, Tyler Calvaruso, is Devin Carter, NC State, big-bodied wide receiver. We were breaking him down a little bit last week, but it's a not so fast, my friend moment. Tell us why.
Yeah, so he's in the directory, but he is yet to enroll in any specific classes. And the reason for that being is it seems like the Carter camp is still doing a little bit of soul searching. And when I say soul search, I mean figuring some things out in terms of maximizing Devin's value and putting him in the best possible situation that they feel represents his value. And I would say there's a chance that Carter is still looking elsewhere for sure. There's a chance he could pop up elsewhere for a visit this upcoming weekend based on what I've been hearing. But there's still a chance that Penn State could get this done because they like the player. They still want the player for sure. There's no doubt about that. I know West Virginia is involved in this entire ordeal, and West Virginia's involvement is pretty interesting to me because they're also heavily after CJ Williams, and they're kind of, that's kind of a juggling act for them because there are only so many spots to go around, right? So where does Carter fit? Where does Williams fit? Is West Virginia seriously a landing spot for him at this point in time? We'll see. But the fact of the matter is it's not done between Carter and Penn State right now. He's not a done deal to the Nittany Lions. But at the same time, Penn State's not out of the race by any means. They definitely still want him to be part of this team next season. And the two sides are working to figure out the details. So a really fluid situation that we'll be monitoring throughout the course of the week. And, if it falls through and Carter doesn't wind up at Penn State, it's back to the drawing board. And there are still some pretty quality names on the board for the staff.
Tyler, we're talking about transfer players who are here on campus. The freshmen that we're going to get into in a moment are tweeting all their photos from the front row of classrooms. What's the timeline here? I mean, there's not a lot of time to waste. When is he trying to make a decision?
It seems like really it's not about when he wants to make a decision. It feels like Sunday is when he has to make a decision because with Penn State's registration, with their whole deal with registering for classes and everything like that, he has to be in by Sunday because he's a mid-year enrollee. So that's his situation right now. So he's going to have to make up his mind pretty soon. So this is, no matter what happens, this is going to be a situation that is resolved sooner rather than later. So there will be some finality soon, but I expect this to carry on throughout the weekend.
This is such a fascinating area of interest, of emphasis, I guess, for Penn State in the transfer portal, because from day one of the postseason transfer window, December 5th, when that opened up, it's obviously been a priority. We've seen some familiar names like Dante Thornton, who's a former Penn State commit. He has since landed with Tennessee via transfer out of Oregon. Dante Cephas has been a popular topic. We've touched on that. You said that may need to be something that we revisit a few months from now, and he may not be able to transfer until after the spring semester. And there's a lot of things involved there. Who are the other names? There's been some guys on campus. I know you said if this blows up with Carter, it's kind of dropped back to the drawing board. But who are some of those other irons in the fire right now that Penn State fans need to be aware of?
So Tyrone Broden from Bowling Green, the big wide receiver transfer, 6'7", he's listed at. He was on campus for his official visit over the weekend. Going into that visit, the buzz was really surrounding Oklahoma. It seemed like the Sooners had a real edge there, but I'm not sure he's a take right there right now. I'm working to try and see if, what the deal is on Penn State end in that regard as well. But another big body. So if you do lose Carter, maybe that's a guy you could bring in, kind of replaces that with a very, very similar skill set. Freddie Roberson from Eastern Washington, FCS transfer. He's going to be on campus for his official visit this week, and we wrote about that on late Saturday night. Lots of like there, I would say, based on his tape. Reminds me a little bit of Mitch Tinsley, more of a technician, not gonna overwhelm you athletically, but good route runner, good hands, guy who can make plays at this level. Romello Brinson from Miami, still on the market after his official visit to Penn State, and some really positive vibes surrounding that visit. The Manny Diaz connection looming large there. I think Brinson's giving the Nittany Lions a pretty good look. And yeah, with Cephas, really nothing new to share on that front. It's more kind of wait and see if he can make it work somewhere being in the portal right now. But if he has to go back to Kent State and take care of business on that end, then re-enter in the spring, I think that's something that they're prepared to do over there. So we'll see. Another fluid situation that we'll be monitoring. But if that one goes on into the spring, I think Penn State will still be involved there once that time rolls around.
very much day to day right now with transfer portal news. Tyler Calvaruso has been doing a fantastic job at Lions247.com for our VIP subscribers to keep everybody updated. A great job on this podcast as well. And something else we've got to get to in just a moment is the Junior Day recruiting event, because recruiting is always on the radar as well. But finishing up the transfer conversation here, defensive line target for Penn State, a guy who got to Happy Valley for a visit, Davon Sears, announcing he'll be heading to Oklahoma for his next college destination. And that leaves me to wonder what's next at the interior defensive line spot. For as much as we talked about as the depth and the reinforcements at defensive end, you're losing to PJ Mustipher. It feels like there's a need for a big body in the middle, whether it's a starter or a guy who's just played a bunch of college football. And right now, it doesn't seem like we have those answers.
Tough to say. I think there's a lot of reevaluating with Sears going off the board to Oklahoma. Sears was someone that the staff did indeed want, for sure. No doubt about that, because there's been so much talk, like you just said, about replacing Mustipher, and that's been a pitch to a lot of interior defensive line targets, and that was the pitch to Sears. He decides to go to Oklahoma. While he was wanted, I don't think the staff is necessarily losing sleep over this. It's, hey, we lost one, now we got to get back at it and get back to the board. I know Branson Dean was a name that had been kicked around a little bit from Purdue. He's going to Miami, so that's another guy who's off the board now. So, yeah, I think John Scott Jr. and Deion Barnes and just really the entire staff just really getting after trying to figure out where they can find a fit on the line. And I remember us having a similar conversation about this in the summer after TJ Parker decommitted and the staff going back to the drawing board and figuring things out. You ask me, they came out pretty well at the end of all that. So I think they're looking to recreate some of that magic in the portal.
And I feel like I end every transfer conversation by reminding our listeners that Chop Robinson did not enter the transfer portal until late March of 2022. And you saw what he did as the year progressed in a Penn State uniform. Let's get to the freshman enrollees, because there are a bunch of them. And let's start with the offensive line, Daniel Gallen, because we just talked about Drew Shelton. We just talked about the fact that Bryce Effner is gone, but you've got a young component in Drew Shelton. You got another one inside in Vega Ione, who got a bunch of time this year. Those two got some time this year, especially Shelton. You've got two tackle back in Olu Fashanu and Caden Wallace. You lose your center, but Hunter Norzat's expected to slide over there. And, of course, Landon Tengwall coming back from injury. Salim Wormley proving he can stay on the field healthy, playing all these games as a starter this year. A lot of names, and now we add three pretty high-profile prospects. Anthony Donko, I think people forget that he got a 4-star bump in the 24/7 Sports rankings here during his senior season. And then people know the names Javen Williams and Alex Birchmeyer by now, both top 100 prospects. Williams finishes as a top 30 overall prospect. He ends up as a 5-star in our rankings. And Daniel, a lot to like about this group, especially that they're here in January. Birchmeyer and Williams projected to play tackle to begin things, Donka inside. What do you make of this influx coming at a moment where it feels like a bit of a luxury? And I didn't think this offensive line was capable of producing luxuries about a year ago. So it's a really good spot for Phil Trautwein to be in.
I think probably at this point last year, when you look at the picture of the offensive line, that there are some thoughts that, Birchmeyer might have to come in and play right away or something.
They couldn't play a real spring game. They couldn't play a real spring game because of offensive line numbers.
Exactly. So I think that Penn State, it's what a difference a year makes. Penn State is in good shape when it comes to the top of their offensive line, and I think that all three of these guys have the opportunity to, maybe not necessarily crack the 2 deep, but provide valuable depth. I think it is really important that they're here in the spring. You talk about the physical development that an offensive lineman has to go through, in the adjustment to college, even though these guys are pretty advanced already themselves. And I think another benefit that James Franklin touched on signing day is figuring out where they fit. Birchmeyer is someone who I think long-term might translate to the interior. I know that the same thing has been said about Javen Williams, but Penn State is going to give them the opportunity to play out there at tackle and see if it works. And I mean, why not? You have them here for the spring. You need to know what you have, especially when you get into a season and, you might need to fill some holes here and there. You need to know who's your swing guy, who can only play on the left side, who can only play on the right side. This is a really good time to experiment, especially with players who might not necessarily be called on to play major reps in their first years on campus. So I think this will be a really valuable spring for these players. Penn State needs them to really be serviceable when you look at some of the misses that they've had and some of the guys who haven't panned out. You talk about losing Nate Bruce in that class of 2021. You're losing a depth piece in Bryce Effner moving on. You really need to kind of shore up the long-term health of the offensive line. And I think that starts now with getting these players into campus and into winter workouts and seeing really what you have there, because the ceiling right now for all three of those players seems really, really high. And why not find out how high that ceiling can be right now?
James Franklin made an interesting comparison about how he's gone about starting off some guys at cornerback, knowing that he anticipated they'd transition to safety, or at least that was kind of the thought process that might ultimately be the transition. We've seen it with Signee Wheatley, of course, pay off for this defense. But he mentioned that with the tackles and playing Javen and playing Alex outside on the perimeter, letting them match up on an island of sorts against that speed and then seeing how they handle it. That experience isn't going to hurt them inside, but I think they want to see what they get. And by the way, this group of edge rushers on the practice field for Penn State, they'll do their part in helping you figure out what you've got in Alex Birchmeyer and Javen Williams early on once these guys put on pads in March and through April. But I think at the tackle position right now, it's a fair question to wonder if maybe if the two starting jobs, if we're going to say that Caden Wallace is going to be a right tackle, which I don't think anybody's going to completely jump on right now, but he's back. He's a guy who's been your starter when healthy since 2020. He played quite a bit in the Rose Bowl, coming back after missing the last 5 games of the season. And then, of course, you got Olu Fashanu, who is a set-it-and-forget-it franchise left tackle right now. And so you're wondering, what does that mean for Drew Shelton? Is he going to be entrenched as the backup left tackle and bide his time, or is he going to maybe work on some new things and they're going to get a look at him at the right side, and maybe he's going to push for that kind of role? And then you got Jimmy Christ, who was the swing tackle when Effner was starting, and you had Caden Wallace out. So there's a lot to work through there, but I think there's certainly room for either of these players to step up, and I think command some attention early on. I wouldn't be surprised if we come out of spring practice and we're hearing really good things about one or two of these guys in terms of maybe being in that mix to potentially ditch a red shirt next season. That's not an easy accomplishment. It wasn't going to happen for Drew Shelton until Olu Fashanu went down, but they've prioritized both of those prospects for a very long time. They've now got them on campus, and I think there's reason to be excited if you're a Penn State fan when you look at this offensive line room, what these guys bring to it. You can really say the same thing about tight end, because Tyler Calvaruso, Brenton Strange, had a really fantastic first half of the season. It was more the Theo Johnson show in terms of stat sheet during the second half of the season, but Strange, a strong blocker. He's going to make his move and see what he can do with the NFL. But you've got 3 tight ends coming in with this group. The one I'm highest on, Andrew Rappleyea, won't get to campus for a little bit longer, but Joey Schlaffer and Mega Barnwell, both on campus right now. Mega, we called him the mystery man because we weren't sure if he would land at tight end. We still got a ways to figure out with him. But Joey, who's a younger brother of former Penn State lineman Michael Mennett, and has known this staff for a long time, I really like what they're adding to him and the fact that he gets on campus January. Got a lot of speed for his size, so much so that we had some people on the board wondering if he might be able to play wide receiver. And he's a guy who played some quarterback at the high school level. So I think he's got a pretty good understanding of offense, of what it takes to run an offense, of what it takes to be involved with other guys. So for me, I think you're getting a pretty good prospect profile in Schlaffer. And if I'm being honest, I'm just not quite sure what Mega Barnwell is going to be in 2023, much less 2025.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you when it comes to Barnwell. But when it comes to Schlaffer, I mean, I think he's one of the more underrated prospects in this class, just for the reasons you outlined, really. He got a lot faster this offseason. I remember during the summer when he went to go camp for the staff and he worked out and he ran a 40 before everyone else showed up, and his time was significantly better than it was previously. And the staff is really, really pleased with that. And another guy who can do a lot of different things for you in an offense, but everything that I've heard about Schlaffer indicates he could do a lot of different things for you off the field as well. Going back to his high school career, very well respected as a leader at Exeter, and I think that's something else that he's going to bring to Penn State as well. Pretty early in his career, some guys you just gravitate towards, and it seems like he has that kind of personality. So, good player on the field. I think he's going to be a positive impact off the field as well. Really underrated member of the class, in my opinion. And then we talk about Rapp. I mean, what more can you say about him? I'm really excited about him. He's up there in this class. I think he might be one of the best 3-5 guys come out of this group when it's all said and done. I think he has that kind of athletic potential. He's really come along as a receiver, and I think he's going to keep getting better under the tutelage of Ty Howell. So a lot of upside there. And if he puts all the pieces together, I think we're talking about a really special tight end who has a chance to go play at the next level and be an impact player at the next level for a really long time.
Going back to Joey's stats real quick, all-time county records at Exeter Township, a high school with 2,493 receiving yards and 28 receiving touchdowns. Those are pretty crazy numbers. But like you said, Andrew Rappleyea, I'm with you. It's tricky because these guys are getting a head start in that room.
Mhm.
It's a group where anybody's going to have to climb the depth chart because you've got Theo Johnson, we think, coming back, but we haven't heard anything officially from him. Maybe that changes by the time you hear this podcast. Tyler Warren's played a ton of Big Ten football. Maybe he's ready to take that next step. Khalil Dinkins seems like he's ready to take another step in year 3. And then Jerry Cross, it made progress from the practice field as a freshman, but I feel like there's still some room there for a newcomer if he's ready to hit it running, whether it's Schleifer or a little bit later here in the calendar year, Andrew Rappleyea. I think there's room for a freshman to impress upon Ty Howell and this coaching staff and put themselves in a position to be a factor come the fall. Another position that gets an addition here this month is Jackson Smolik. And it's important, Daniel, because everyone's on the Drew Aller bandwagon at this point. There's a new QB1 in town. Bo Perbula is your new projected primary backup, but maybe he'll have to battle that a little bit because Jackson Smolik coming to town, he's going to have, 8-9 months underneath his belt before Penn State plays some football. He's a guy who we've documented a lot here in the podcast, had him on a couple weeks ago, injured as a junior, ends up going to the Elite 11 on a late invite, impressing people. Penn State gets involved, flips him from Tulane, and lo and behold, he ends up the next man up. And a lot of people you talk to say he's the right personality, he's the right prospect to follow up that 2-quarterback class that was headlined by Aller. And this is a guy that I think we're going to see traveling to road games next year and really maybe a play or two away from taking over the reins as quarterback for what is projected as a top 10 team. Do not overlook this young man as he gets underway on campus.
We saw Bo Perbula travel to every away game this year, even though he was the number 4 quarterback or one of 4 quarterbacks. And I think Smolik really pencils in right now as that number 3. So, he'll be on the road. They'll let him get to see those environments. They'll get him exposed to all the different situations that you're going to see as a college quarterback. But I think along with sort of offensive line and the really physically demanding positions, I think that as a quarterback, you need to get there. You need to be an early enrollee, especially the way that college football works now, and especially if you might be called on to contribute early. We heard about it with Drew Aller in terms of the strides that he really made from the spring to the fall. And that really culminated with what we saw in against Purdue on that opening night. The fact that he was ready, I think a lot of that goes back to being on campus early, getting the chance to have spring with the playbook, working with Mike Yurcich, and really jumpstarting that development curve. So, it is the thing where in a perfect world, Penn State won't need Jackson Smolik, but we've seen them have to go down the depth chart because of injuries or other reasons. And, you need to be ready. So I think as a quarterback, getting here in January, really being able to jumpstart this process, being able to work with Mike Yurcich, to work with Drew Aller and Bo Perbula and the rest of that offensive staff, I think that only good things can come out of that for Jackson Smolik, and that'll let Penn State know what it has in its quarterback room, what the depth chart is going to look like, what else they might need, how they might need to adjust things. So I think for Smolik, it's only a good thing.
6 guys on campus on the offensive side of the football in this freshman class now, and then 5 on defense. And I'll let you handle these, Tyler Calvaruso, as we're running a little bit late on time before we get to Lamont Payne. But Tamir Robinson, Tony Rojas at linebacker, both top 24/7 prospects. Zion Tracy, Elliott Washington, and Lamont Payne projected at cornerback. That's a lot to like in terms of influx. You add the Storm Duck to that, and Manny Diaz got to be licking his chops a bit as he reevaluates what he has in that back 7.
Yeah, it's a really quality group, and I think of all those names you just mentioned, Elliott Washington is the one to really watch at this point, because we talk a lot. We just had a whole segment about Storm Duck and the opportunity he has to come in and make an instant impact. I think Elliott Washington has a chance to do the same thing at corner. I think there's a lot of refinery to his game already, and you're going to get Terry Smith working with him now for 8-9 months before the start of the season. I mean, there's a lot that could be accomplished there to get Washington to become a day one player. And, the other names, Zion Tracy, speedster, they're going to work on his coverage ability a lot, because just if you have a guy who's that fast and is already that high quality of a cover corner, if you could just continue to fine tune his technique and really get him refined to the kind of point where Washington already is, you're talking about a potentially special player. And then with guys like Robinson, Rojas, I mean, what can you say about them, especially Rojas? I mean, geez, you go look at the senior season that he had. There's a lot of excitement surrounding him. he's, if he could, we talk so much about Penn State's linebacker depth now with Jacobs coming back, and there's just being so many quality pieces in that room. Imagine if Rojas is ready to go from day one and what he could bring to the table with his athletic profile. I mean, you're talking about it's a different beast. And Manny Diaz, he's got a lot to work with these early enrollees. And then once everyone makes it to campus and this entire class is there, I think he might be salivating because he's got some dudes, man. Guys like Jamal Lyons, and all, once they get on campus, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a good group.
And Tamir Robinson, by the way, we heard from Terry Smith on signing day. It sounds like he's going to be full go in terms of health where he needs to be for Penn State, which is a great sign. He's not coming here to recover. He's coming here to hit the ground running. He missed a senior season with an injury. So good to hear on Robinson. I'm with you on Rojas, though. It doesn't look like there's a lot of pathway right now to significant playing time at linebacker. But I'll tell you what, you watch what he accomplished as a high school senior, and you just look at the general prospect profile, and there's a reason that he was elevated from outside the top 24/7 to right around the top 100 by it was all said and done. A lot to like about the kid. And then just one more note on Zion Tracy. I mentioned it before in the podcast. Still some internal discussion among Penn State coaches about maybe is he going to be a fit at wide receiver? He's going to be a cornerback. That's the plan right now, but there's been some internal debate, much like with Lamont Payne, safety, cornerback, and we'll hear from Lamont on that in just a moment. Let's recap with a couple things here, starting with let's finish this conversation with a couple things here. Junior Day recruiting event set for Saturday in Penn State. It's always a common spot on the January calendar to see this event pop up. It's going to be an important one. You've been reporting some of these out-of-region visitors as things have gone on. Brian Doan contributing with a bunch of reports here on Tuesday, adding to that list. What do we make of what's coming together for the Junior Day?
Kind of what I said earlier, it's a really impressive list coming together. You got guys like Keelan Adams, who's a top 24/7 receiver, who's really high on Penn State, coming back to campus. Jalen Harvey, everyone knows his name by now because he's been to campus a hell of a lot. He's going to be back this weekend for his 4th visit since October. He's really looking forward to getting back with the staff, reconnecting with them. Penn State 24/7 Sports Crystal Ball leader with Harvey. I think we really like where those picks are at right now. That's going to continue. Nittany Lions have themselves in a pretty decent spot, And then the out-of-region guys, Mantrez Walker, 2025 linebacker from Georgia, Justin Baker, his Buford teammate, 2025 running back will be there. Blake Frazier, an offensive lineman from Texas, 2024, he'll be there. Penn State staff likes him a lot. Phil Trotway has put in a lot of work to get him to campus, trust me. And now that's coming to fruition, so they're really happy about that visit. And Philadelphia duo, the quarterback wide receiver duo of Samaj Jones and Brandon Ryman, they're going to be on campus. Mekhi Edwards from Christ the King in New York, he's going to be on campus. We could rattle off names all day. Corey Duff Jr. just told me he's going to be on campus. We actually got the article up on that in the middle of the podcast. So there's a lot coming together for this weekend. And like I said earlier, it's only Tuesday, so there are going to be more names flooding in. And by the end of the week, we're going to have a pretty healthy list. I think it's going to be a pretty full list with a lot of high-quality names. And I'm anticipating that's going to be the case next weekend as well. I think that the second Junior Day is going to be a pretty big weekend as well. So we'll be keeping an eye on both of those weekends with guys who are coming to campus. Oh, one other one who's coming, Willie Love. I want to touch on him. Willie Love from South Jersey. Staff's high on him a lot in the secondary. A lot of quality traits. He'll be on campus this weekend as well. So it's a good group.
Willie Love, currently from South, he's heading down to IMG though, is he?
That's Eric Lee. He's already at IMG.
I read Doan's story. I'm reading it now. It says he's transferring to IMG.
Is he going to IMG?
Yeah, everyone's going to IMG.
Another one.
Yeah. You know a guy's pretty good if they're getting scooped up from the Northeast and heading down to IMG. It's that happens year to year. And so, hey, fellas, I really appreciate it. We've covered a ton of ground, a ton of time here. Going to get to Lamont Payne in just a moment, but appreciate all the coverage from both of you. Bunch happening at Lions247.com. Daniel, Tyler, talk to you real soon here on the podcast. All right, just before he gets to campus in Happy Valley, we have an opportunity to speak with incoming freshman Lamont Payne, a member of the 2023 Penn State recruiting class. And Lamont joining us from his home right now, but about to hit the road. Man, we appreciate it. I know how much of a transition this can be. You've got a lot on your plate right now to set some time aside for us to hop on the podcast. It means a lot, and we thank you for that.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a couple weeks now since signing day. Big day for you, big day for your family. How have the last couple of weeks gone as you've prepared to make this big move?
It's been hectic, but it's been pretty cool. Running around trying to get stuff together. I kind of wanted to spend time with like my friends and my family as much as I could before I left, and just putting work in, working out, lifting, stuff like that. So I'm prepared and ready to go up there.
A lot of recruits along the way come up with a plan to enroll early. It sounds great. And then they get there and Christmas goes by and mom and dad are around. And all of a sudden they start to realize that their friends aren't going to be around them every day. Mom and dad aren't going to be there every day. Has that kind of sunk in for you? And why was this the move for you to get up there, 5-6 months ahead of some of your peers?
I feel like my mom asked me, she's like, has it hit you yet? And like I told her no. But like this morning, like I have little sisters, I have a bunch of little sisters. So like saying bye to them was kind of like the hard part of it because they go to school and I'm gotta go to school because I finished. But really mainly them that I think about. But like obviously I know that they support me and also I got a whole community behind me, so it kind of makes like leaving early a little bit better and easier. And when it comes to like early enrolling, it's something me and my parents talked about that we wanted to do. Just like I'm ahead of the curve. Have better experience, get a chance to like get early playing time in the spring game and whatnot. So I think it was just an overall good decision.
We'll get to a lot of the football part in a moment, but a couple of things I want to ask about. A lot of freshmen showing up to a college campus. You wonder these things. One, who is your roommate going to be? And two, what are some of the essentials that you have to have in that dorm room to be comfortable?
My roommate's Javen. He's an O lineman.
Yep.
He'll be moving in later because he's at an All-American game right now. So he'll move in like Sunday, but I think our room will be full of food. It's gonna be a good oriented room. So I'm excited to room with him.
Yeah, I got a defensive back. I don't know how much you weigh, 180s around there maybe. Then you've got Javen Williams, who a lot of people think might be the top offensive lineman in America right now. So yeah, I'd imagine you're going to have a challenge in keeping up with the calorie intake along the way. Now looking at the football side of things here. Terry Smith told me on signing day when I asked about the defensive back class that for the guys, he knows where they're going to play, cornerback or safety. You were the exception. He said could be cornerback, could be safety. When we want to get a feel for this thing and do what's right for Lamont, do what's right for the Nittany Lions. What's your sense on that conversation right now?
As of right now, obviously I want to play corner. I've been playing corner for a while now. I've been getting recruited for corner, but obviously I'm going to a top tier school, so their input and their say also has a big impact, because they want what's best for me and what's best for my interests. So, as of right now, I'm open to whatever, whatever chance it gets to just like have me go in the field more early. So I'm kind of open to everything.
Lamont, of course, you were an all-state selection as a cornerback at Chartiers Valley. You were a pretty impressive receiver as well. I know it wasn't a big numbers, but 20 yards per catch. You had 4 interceptions as a senior. I'm curious, what's your case for staying at cornerback? If someone were to say, why do you think cornerback is the position you should stay at in football? What's your answer?
I feel like cornerback, it's a very hard position to play, and not everybody can play it. And like for the people who can play it and who are good at it, that's kind of like in the NFL, if you look at kind of where the money's at, because there's not everybody who can play cornerback, and it's kind of harder to teach cornerback. Like it takes time and it comes with experience like that. So that's what would make me want to be cornerback, because everybody wants to be a receiver, catching touchdowns and all that, all that fun stuff. But I like being a corner and getting down like nitty gritty and stuff like that. So
you like stopping the guys from catching touchdowns.
Right.
That's your goal. And when you watch this cornerback group play for Penn State, obviously you spent this entire senior season of yours committed to the program. So I'm sure you were keeping a close eye. Joey Porter Jr. looks like he's going to be a first-round pick. Kalen King really showed up at an elite level really throughout the season, got the interception in the Rose Bowl. And then you go down the list and look at some of the depth here with Johnny Dixon and Marquise Wilson and Daquan Hardy and the freshman Cam Miller. How would you kind of summarize what you saw from that group?
Honestly, it was amazing. Kalen, Joey, all those guys, anytime I went up there, they've always showed me love. They've always gave me advice. I always felt comfortable going up to them and talking to them if I ever needed anything. So, and then on top of that, them having the years that they had, it was really eye-opening because it just shows that, they're obviously doing something right. Coach Terry's doing something right, and they're just producing. So that was really important.
Defensively, it was a big season for Penn State. They seemed to get stronger as the year went on under Manny Diaz. What was your impression of that unit overall, and how much kind of communication have you had with the defensive coordinator?
Oh, before the season, everybody had all the critics talking about Coach Diaz and all this stuff and how the Penn State defense would do. So it was pretty cool seeing them perform how they performed. Kind of like silence those critics. But Coach Diaz, he's seen me multiple times. spent time with him, one-on-one, and just to get a feel for things and get an understanding for the defensive scheme and stuff like that. So
sticking with the coaching staff, what stands out about Terry Smith? Because it feels like he's gotten a ton out of his position group here in the last several years. He's been on the staff for a decade, essentially, right now. What makes him, I guess, maximize players like you once they get to campus from your impression thus far?
Honestly, I feel like it. I feel like he's straight up with everybody. He's very, forward with everybody. Like he keeps it 100%. He don't really, he don't give you like this pity and pat. He'll just tell you how it is, and I think that's really what you need at that position, especially. So.
And at the top of the food chain for Penn State in terms of the coaching staff, you've got James Franklin. You've been on campus a bunch of times. You've attended the prospect camps, which I want to ask you about in a moment. But what is overall the impression that your parents got from James Franklin as they kind of entrust him with you for these next few years?
Right. Coach Franklin's amazing. We had an in-home visit. He was like, he's so homely. Welcome. Like my sisters always go up to him, and he's never like the type to steer them away. He's always like welcome in. It's like he's one of your own. That essentially is what it feels like. And it was just on my whole recruiting process, he was the most consistent with me when it comes to like reaching out, asking how the fam was, making sure like I was a top priority, making me feel that way. So it was definitely a major thing.
As I just referenced, you were able to get to some camps this summer. An in-state prospect's a little bit easier for you than maybe some of the other guys in the class. But what did you gain from that experience before your senior season, getting to work with Terry on the field, getting to get some observations from James Franklin, and obviously going against some pretty impressive wide receiver talent that they brought in this summer?
It was good. I felt like it's kind of what I needed. I feel like it shaped me in a way, like preparing for my season, and it kind of gave me like an edge. It felt good getting like early work with Coach Terry, so I kind of get a feel for like what type of coach he is, how he likes to do things. He's very detail oriented, which was something I'm glad I like learned kind of from the beginning, and I think that stuff's gonna help me when I go up there.
You committed a while ago. You spent
Right.
a long time in this class. As a junior, you announced your intentions to come to Penn State. But maybe going into your senior year, once you were established, people recognized you as a likely all-state kind of player. You had the Penn State commitment label. Did you notice offenses, opponents approach you a little bit differently on the field this fall?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I want to say first 3 weeks of my season, they put me at safety, and teams really didn't know how to adjust to that. So I feel like that was good, but also throughout the year, like not many teams did throw my way. Obviously, we have Aliquippa, Central Valley teams who are, top level competition who threw my way, which is, I was happy for because, those are kids on those team are, they're top notch. So it was good playing against them. But other than that, it was pretty a quiet year, when it came to like throwing to my side. So.
You mentioned the fact that you played some safety early on, and maybe it was a schematic decision to kind of throw off some of those opponents. But what did you learn playing some at that position, and how did you feel playing there?
I had to adjust to it, like naturally, but, just playing on defense is what I like to do. So adjusting to safety wasn't that bad. It's definitely way easier than corner. I don't really it's either I'm helping over top and come down and run fit, or that's how at least it was for my program that I was in. So it was cool. It kind of like gave me a feel for like an understanding what the safety has to do and how the safety and corner have to communicate. So it definitely like gave me a better understanding on how to understand a safety or whoever's behind me, because like they're the last level of defense if something breaks away. So it definitely helped me.
What are your short-term goals at Penn State? You're getting to campus this weekend. You're going to have a few months here with the upcoming semester, eventually getting to winter workouts, eventually getting those 15 spring practice periods, finishing off in Beaver Stadium in the blue-white game. What's at the top of your list in terms of what you want to accomplish between now and summer?
Honestly, I kind of want to just go in, give it 110% every rep. I don't want to look back and be like, oh, I could have did this better. I could have did this harder. I just want to go full throttle because, like I said earlier, I'm going in for a reason. Like I'm going early for a reason. So I just want to go and give it all my all.
We saw a couple defensive backs burn their red shirt this year. KJ Winston at safety, Kim Miller at cornerback. I'm curious, how important is it for you to earn your right to burn that red shirt and have a real role in this defense in 2023?
Obviously, that's major. In high school, when you're a freshman in high school, you have to build up your name, build up, the stuff behind your name. And I feel like it's the same thing. You know, you're going in, it's like a fresh, clean slate. You gotta build who you are, and I feel like that's really important because I feel like some guys, they feel like high school can carry over to college, and that's just not the case. You know, that's how you kind of like end up not getting what you want. So I feel like just remaining humble and, you know, just going in there with the intention like I'm gonna do my job every day, 1% every day, and that's how I'm gonna get where I want to get.
Do you have any existing relationships in the cornerback room that you're excited to build on? Maybe someone hosted you on campus during your official visit. Maybe a guy who's just been in steady contact with you throughout the season.
I've talked to Joey multiple times, but, you know, obviously he's leaving. But I even talked to some of the safeties too, so it's just cool like to have the DBs in general. But Kalen, you know, I went for the whiteout game, and, you know, Kalen will always talk to me. He'd always give me advice. He's never like the type to, you know, like shy away from me. Like if he sees me, he'll say what's up. He'll say, you know, he'll ask how my family's doing. So it's always good, and it's good to know that I have like people who are older than me and older examples who I can look at.
My understanding, Lamont, is that you were pretty important during the recruiting cycle in terms of being that peer who was a sounding board for guys. Maybe if things got a little shaky, you helped stabilize that. That's the word that I got. What kind of a role do you think you played in this recruiting class?
I would agree with that. You know, me being the second commit and, you know, one of the like top commit, not top commits like when it comes to like grading, stuff like that, but, you know, just in the class in general, I feel like it was important, you know, get guys on board and just kind of help the coaches and also help like my class essentially. Because, you know, at the end goal is we want to win a national championship. So getting those top guys was definitely key. So like Tamir, you know, he's one of my best friends, close friends. So like just getting him there was important to me, getting Tony, getting all these guys. So
yeah, and obviously you did a really good job closing out this class in strong fashion. What did you think about defensively? What we were able to do there? I think the final week leading up to signing day, getting a couple defensive ends, getting a linebacker in Kavion Keys. How do you feel like you got to the finish line for the early signing period?
Defensive wise, I'm actually very excited. You know, we have Elliott coming, Zion, Tracy, Akari, all those defensive guys, King Mack. So it's really going to be cool how the defensive side, you know, plays out. The same with the offensive side. You know, Mega, Joey, all those guys. You know, we're all close. So and I all know, and like I know all their skills, like all their skill sets, and they all want to go into work. We all communicate. We're a close knit group. So I'm excited to see how they do.
I know you're already pretty competitively driven, but we saw that Storm Duck commits to Penn State last week as a transfer out of North Carolina. We expect him to land in the cornerback room. Is that kind of just an early wake-up call that the competition starts right away? Because you're going to get there in January. He gets there in January. We've already listed the guys who are right there. How much does that get your adrenaline pumping? Because I'd imagine your starting spot was pretty safe at the high school level the last few years.
Right. Yeah, like I said before, you know, you start fresh, so it's like you have to want to come in and compete every day. You can't shy away from competition because, you know, at the end of the day, that's what the coaches want to see. They want to see you come in, do your job, do it right, do it how they say. If they want you to be coachable. And it's like I feel like what, you know, the new commitment of Storm Duck, it's like it shows you that it's really a business. Like you have to earn your way through it all. So I'm not shying away from no competition.
And the last look that we got at Penn State without you on the roster was the Rose Bowl win against Utah on Monday night out in Southern California. What were your thoughts on that overall performance and the way to finish off the 11-2 season?
I felt like it was a kind of a really good way to cap it off. You know, you're going to one of the biggest bowl games in college football, and to beat an opponent like that, like Utah, you know, they're not just no regular team. You know, they had their success, and we just had bigger success. So it was really good to see the guys win. I loved it.
What is the last kind of message that the staff has given you and other enrollees in terms of what you should expect, what you should anticipate once you get underway on campus? Because I heard James on signing day morning giving a bit of a warning, saying you think it's going to be hard. It's going to be even harder than that. What is kind of the mindset that they're trying to instill with you guys?
I remember Coach Franklin came to my house and he told me, he's like, during these workouts, you know, they're not supposed to be easy. They're going to make you want to quit. And that's just kind of like how they mold you into, you know, being a top-notch college football player. So, like I said before, I'm not really shying away from any of that because at the end of the day, that's what I want to do with my life. This is what I want to do in my future. So I'm excited for all of it.
All right, Lamont, we're not going to get a chance to talk to you for probably about a year in terms of media availability. So, open mic moment. What is your message to Penn State fans about what you and this class are bringing to town and what you want to accomplish during your stay in Penn State?
Before I say that, I want to give a shout out to DeMar Hamlin. I train with him, and seeing what he has to go through. It's a blessing to see he's talking. You don't have to breathe to him anymore. So I just want to give him a shout out because he was a big role for me when it came to my recruitment. He kind of steered me in the right direction. So shout out to him. But Penn State fans, I want you guys to be excited. I want to take it by storm. I want to show everybody like I'm coming in. I'm ready to work. I'm ready to earn my spot. I'm excited just to make all those fans of Beaver happy and Beaver Stadium happy.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't realize your connection with DeMar, who I certainly remember well from his time in the area. We're all thinking about him this week.
Right.
The football community, the sports community across the country. I'm just curious, what you mentioned he steered you on the right path in recruiting. What exactly did you mean by that?
So if there's ever an issue, like I'll take recruiting visits, stuff like that. If there's ever an issue or like I question something, I'll always go to him and be like, did your program do it this way? Like, how did you guys do things? And not trying to see which one was better, just get an understanding for Pitt as well as other programs, how they compare. When it came to the playbook, he helped me have ways I can study and making flashcards, stuff like that. And just anytime there was an issue I had or something I questioned about college football or the transition from high school to football, he was always there for me. He was always welcoming with my family. He never like I said before, he never shied us away. So he's a very cool family friend.
Yeah, and everything you hear on the young man is very glowing, and we're all rooting for him. It's good to hear that he's responsive, and I hope that you get more good news on DeMar and you get a chance to connect with him soon. But first things first, let's get you to campus. Appreciate your time on the podcast, and next time we talk, we'll be doing it in person, Lamont. So thank you. Thank you again to Lamont Payne for his time just before getting to campus. He is now settled in the classrooms, going to be getting that acclimation leading up to spring ball with the rest of these freshmen. A lot to keep tabs on these days at Lions247.com, including these roster additions, some of these roster exits. We're still waiting on more announcements from some veterans regarding their 2023 status. When those announcements come, we'll have reaction over at the site. And when breaking news develops on any of this kind of stuff, it'll be over at Lions247.com as well. We're back with another episode later this week. We got another guest coming up that I think our listeners will really appreciate. In the meantime, stepping aside for now, on behalf of my colleagues Daniel Gallen and Tyler Calvaruso, I am Tyler Donohue. We'll talk to you real soon right here on the Lions 24/7 podcast.